Hi everyone. Before you dive into the episode, I just wanted to interrupt really quickly. You're gonna dive into this episode and you're gonna hear me call this podcast the Holistic Hustle Podcast. And that is because it used to be the old name of this podcast. And it was an amazing ride. I'm so grateful for the Holistic Hustle Podcast and what it served. But recently I've decided to rebrand the podcast based off the evolution of my own journey, my own story, and where God is calling me to go next. And so now the rebrand, which you may know already, is called Wisdom is Wealth. Didn't want you to be confused, so dive into this episode. They were an amazing episode, amazing guests, amazing insights, and enjoy.
I hate when people say like, do this to get more motivated, or, you've got to be able to motivate yourself, or here's your hack for motivation. And I say this, I don't want to be motivated. I want to be disciplined.
Hi, I'm Justin Buonamo, and this is Holistic Hustle. Holistic Hustle is doing things for the right reasons, working hard for the right reasons. The healthy balance of what work and progression and accomplishment and success should actually look like.
Welcome back to another episode of the Holistic Hustle Podcast. I have a treat for y'all today. My friend Elizabeth Benton is here, who is an author, a podcaster, and a mama, and just a powerhouse of an incredible human being all around. I first learned about Elizabeth about 4 or 5 years ago, and why and how was because the majority of my clients were obsessed with this woman and her book that she wrote called Chasing Cupcakes. All I used to hear is chasing cupcakes this, chasing cupcakes that. And I'm like, who in the world is this Elizabeth Benton woman? And is this book actually that good? So me and my wife bought it. And I think the raving reviews were an understatement. And then I got a chance to meet Elizabeth. She came in to speak to our community. And as this podcast progressed, I'm like, just knowing Elizabeth, and you guys will see that here today, she is the perfect fit to be a guest here on our podcast. And so Elizabeth, thank you for being here. We're so pumped to have you.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to chat.
Of course. And Elizabeth has an awesome story. She's helped so many people. And one thing I love about Elizabeth is she knows how to overcome excuses. She knows how to stay consistent and be motivated, and also recognize when she is not being those things, right? And she's helped so many other people, show themselves grace, but at the same time, not use grace as an excuse to be lazy, right? And I think maybe I'm getting too into it too fast, but we're living in a world right now where, I think that consistency and discipline and motivation and those types of things are being almost villainized. And so before we hop in too deep down that rabbit hole, can you just tell us what your main motivation or story behind starting to help people drop excuses, ask better questions, and become more consistent is?
Oh gosh, yeah. There's so many different angles we can go in this, and I'll kind of give you the overview, and then we can dive in wherever you want to dive in. I had a lifelong weight struggle. I always say that I was the token fat kid in a thin family, and it became a real issue where my mom really wanted me to lose weight, and I really wanted to lose weight, but I also felt a lot of shame around food and eating. And so I developed all these unhealthy patterns around food and just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger, despite wanting to get smaller and smaller and smaller. And I got to the point where I believed that I just wasn't motivated. Like if I really wanted to lose weight so bad, and I did, but I still kept overeating and binging, like clearly I was just not capable of doing it. I wasn't disciplined enough. I wasn't motivated enough. But what really got me thinking was, in my early adult years, I was super disciplined and motivated in my job, but I cared a whole lot more about losing weight than I cared about my job. So I was at this place where I'm like, how can I be so disciplined in my job, but not in this area that matters so much more to me? And I started to see these really disruptive patterns I had never recognized before around the beliefs that I had about work and the beliefs that I had about myself as an employee, and how they were very, very, very different from the way that I was thinking about my own personal choices and my relationship with food. So I ended up kind of taking a detour. I wanted to get out of debt. I had a lot of student loan debt. My husband at the time had a lot of student loan debt. And as I got out of debt, I realized everything I was doing wrong in health. Like we had this plan for getting out of debt, and not a single week, not a single month went according to plan, but never once did I say, well, screw it. We blew it. We might as well try again next month. But yet I was doing that all the time with my health. And so as I started to get out of debt, and as I started to look at areas of my life where I was really disciplined, I was seeing these massive moments of incongruence that helped me to bridge the gap in my health. And then that helps me to launch a business, because all of those patterns that I was applying to these other areas of my life, I started to apply to my finances and to my health and to my business. And as I did that, everything changed after decades of struggle. And sort of fast forward, I had 4 kids in less than 2.5 years as a business owner. My daughter died unexpectedly. My twins were born as micro preemies and spent over 3 months in a hospital that was a couple hours away while I had a 15-month at home. And so every chapter of my life seems to revisit these themes around what it takes to stay in the game and what it takes to get results and the kinds of things that keep us from getting results.
That's so good. That's so good. Most times the thing that we're most equipped to lead other people on are the things that we struggled with the most, and it sounds like, when it came to your weight and health, the consistency and the results were what you struggled with. And did you ever discover why you were able to show signs and consistency and progress in other areas of your life, but not when it came to your weight and your health?
Oh, yeah. One of my favorite things to tell my clients is that we are the average of the 5 stories we tell ourselves most often, right? Maybe you've heard that said a slightly different way before, like we're the average of the 5 people with whom we spend the most time. I don't love that one because I have 3 toddlers. So like if I'm the average, they're definitely 3 out of my 5. I don't know what that would say about me. But what I know is we're constantly telling ourselves stories. And some of my most common stories around my health or my eating habits or my workout routine were, I'm too tired. This one thing won't hurt. I'll start tomorrow. I've been so good, I deserve it. And my choices reflected those primary stories. Now, the stories I was telling myself in my job were things like, I can figure it out, right? I can figure it out. I can get involved in this. I can learn this. I can prove myself valuable. And my results and my behaviors reflected those stories. And a lot of times these stories go unnoticed. It's kind of like they say a fish doesn't know it's in water. They don't even know what water is. It's just always been there. And that's the way our stories are. We don't even realize that it's not so much, oh, we need to eat less and move more. It's we're telling ourselves these stories all the time that lead automatically without our conscious intervention to these types of choices. And if we don't change the stories and the perspectives, we can't break out of the patterns for longer than maybe a few disciplined weeks or months.
Yeah. Those stories become our truth and our truths become our reality.
Yeah.
And so that's so good. I love the twist on that quote and that piece of advice. And speaking of, what is one popular piece of advice around consistency and motivation that you don't agree with?
Oh, I hate when people say like, do this to get more motivated, or, you've got to be able to motivate yourself, or here's your hack for motivation. And I say this, I don't want to be motivated. I want to be disciplined, right? Because motivation is a feeling. And it's going to be impacted by so many things. If you just got some bad news from your doctor, or if your kid is going through a hard time, you might feel unmotivated. That's normal. That's healthy. That's okay. It's because our interests and our passion are going in another direction. Or maybe you just had a crappy night's sleep, right? There's so many different factors that very reasonably impact our motivation positively or negatively. The goal isn't to always be motivated in the same way that it's not realistic to always be happy or always be optimistic. Our feelings will and should ebb and flow. So if you're relying on motivation, you're basically opting into inconsistency. The question isn't, how can I feel like it more? Or how can I be in the mood to do these things all the time? Because you won't be. When we look at people who are at the top of their game in anything, athletics, business, health, they're not motivated all the time. They're as unmotivated as we are, if not more. But what they are is they're disciplined, meaning I don't have to feel like it. And here's the thing. We already demonstrate that in other areas of our lives. Like you're a new parent, right? there's very many moments where the last thing you want to do is wash another bottle or change another diaper. But your performance as a parent does not in any way at any time hinge on what you feel like doing or feel like not doing, because you understand the stakes are high. You are a good parent, not because you're always in the mood to wipe butts, right? That's not it. You're not always in the mood to do laundry, but you understand what's on the line for it. And so that's what we really have to develop in these other areas of our lives. Not that we always want to, but that we will because we understand what's on the line.
I love this. As y'all can see, perfect timing and fit for this show. And then I just love your take on that. And it reminds me of, I'm a big fan of Ed Milet, and I listened to his podcast, an episode years ago. And he said, if you think that you're going to generate your dream life or ideal outcomes or reach success only on the days, let alone hours, that you feel motivated each week, he was like, good luck with those 2 out of the 7 days, right? And he's like, the difference between successful people and unsuccessful people, right, is not the absence of a lack of motivation, but instead how they overcome it to still stay disciplined, right? Even if they don't love the input, they stay in love with the outcome. And so I absolutely love that take, because yes, do I feel as if we need to listen to our body sometimes and take some time off and slow down 1000%? But people use that as an excuse to be lazy, and they abuse that, right? And then they make being disciplined the enemy. Like, discipline is needed, right? Your discipline is needed if you want to reach the outcomes that you have, because motivation is nowhere near enough. And so I love that. And so, as you can see, EB has some gems here, and those gems are all over her book. And so I love the quote from your book, Chasing Cupcakes, that says, when you decided, meaning yourself, decided to make change, you decided to believe in your potential rather than your past. And when I was prepping for the show a couple of days ago, I've been carrying that with me. And so if someone is listening to this and they feel stuck despite knowing what needs to be done to live the life they want, what advice would you give them?
Well, to kind of piggyback on what you just said in terms of like believing in your potential versus believing in your past is very real, right? We're not saying, oh, that doesn't exist, or, oh, that wasn't significant, or, oh, that isn't a part of what shaped you. But we can very easily fall into this place where we get more of our focus going towards where we've been and how we feel about it than going towards where we want to go and what we're going to do about it. Right? I think that there is a lot we can learn from where we have been, but a lot of people just sit in their feelings about what is already done and gone, which means they have less focus available, less energy available, less time available, less belief available for, hey, what can we do about it? One of my favorite things to say to myself is, so what, now what? You know, I had a period in my business. My daughter died unexpectedly in 2020. And 6 months later, I got pregnant with my son. And going through that experience with him was just very unique, because I was still very deep in grief. And when he was 8 or 9 months old, I got pregnant with spontaneous twins. And that pregnancy was really challenging. And so there was a few-year period where my business was sort of in like maintain mode. And it wasn't falling apart, but it also wasn't growing, and I wasn't working anywhere near as much as I ever had. And I would have moments of like, I'm going to lose it all. You know, I can't work the way that I used to work. And do I even want to work the way that I used to work? And what do I even want to do? And there was just crisis after crisis. And I would say to myself, so what, now what? Meaning, okay, cool. That is then, and we can sit in how we feel about it and in our fears about it, or we can take that awareness and go, okay, so what are we going to do now? Where are we going with this? What can we learn from this? How can we take the next step? And I think we have to progress in that way. It's very real to feel a certain way about what is done and gone. It is very real to doubt yourself based on a pattern that you've lived through. But so what, now what? What are we going to do to take the next step? And sometimes that's as simple as asking for help. I joke that it's like the Elizabeth Benton drinking game, that if anybody wants to be like absolutely wasted all the time, you drink every time I say successful people ask for help. And I think a lot of us grew up in a schooling environment that conditioned us to believe that asking for help is an indication of like not being prepared, or not being intelligent, or not being where you want to be. And knowing was more valuable. But really the most valuable thing in anything, whether we're talking parenting, marriage, business, getting out of debt, improving your health, One of the fastest ways you can move from where you are to where you want to be is ask for help. The more that you develop the ability to raise your hand and say, I don't even know what I need, the faster you will get from where you are to where you want to go. Sometimes people will tell me, but I don't even know what I need help with. You don't have to. If you knew what you needed, you probably wouldn't need help. And I tell my clients just the ability to say, I don't know what I need, but I need something. And then I ask them, do you trust me enough that I can take the next step with you, that I have the resources to mine the data that we're going to need to tease out what's going on and what you might need? Do you trust me? And I've never had anybody tell me no so far, but you have to be willing to ask for help. Often we withdraw. And we go into shame and we go into resentment, or we go into comparison, or we go into just hiding, just pulling away and disengaging. Lean in and ask for help. It's never been more accessible to get help than it is now, right? Whether that help is somebody you pay or somebody that's free, or it's a book or it's a podcast, it doesn't matter. But successful people, they ask for help.
So good. It's so good. And it reminds me of the quote that the past men have not been your fault, but it is damn well your responsibility to step up and take care of your future. Mm-hmm. Right. And I think a lot of people don't realize that a big part of stepping up and taking care of your future is asking for help. Yeah. Right. And my mentor always tells me, is like, when you want to go through true transformation, weakness is the answer. And what he means by weakness is our ability just to simply say, I don't have the answers. I don't know what to do, and I need help. Yep. Right. Which is actually the funny part. That's actually true strength. Right. And 100%. So I absolutely love that. And it kind of helps us shift from the victim to the victor type of stance, if you will. Like, instead of like, life is just happening to me. No, life's happening for you, especially when you said, so what, now what? Now what is the part of like, okay, what is God trying to communicate to me? What can I take from this tension, right? I call it the asset of wisdom from the experience, right? And ultimately go and grow from it. Yeah. And so good. So good. And so, Elizabeth mentioned many times, she works with a lot of people on stuff like this. So if you're somebody that feels stuck, maybe even what you need to do, you just can't do it, right? And you are lacking in consistency, you're lacking in motivation, you're lacking in discipline, and you're just lacking in an outcome of a life that you actually are pleased with. Elizabeth is your girl. Start with her book, Chasing Cupcakes. I'm also going to drop her handle for Instagram. But Elizabeth, where can people find you and connect? Because I got a little bit of a feeling that some motivation is going to be spurred to do so after them listening to this episode.
One of the best places is my podcast. I've been podcasting for about 10 years. We have over 1,600 episodes. So I was doing this back before podcasting was cool. The podcast is called Primal Potential. And we've got an episode on just about everything, right? If you want to get into hormones, if you want to get into nutrition, if you want to get into mindset, if you want to get into relationships, 1,600 episodes. We've got it everywhere. That's probably one of the best places, or Instagram.
I love it. Awesome. So we'll tag all that in the show notes. And Elizabeth, I just appreciate you being here again, because, in full transparency, I think we live in a culture right now that promotes taking care of yourself, which is great. But what's happened is that's swung the pendulum too far, to which I'll call toxic femininity, right? Like, I used to be very toxic masculinity and still show signs of it from time to time. I think in the essence of us trying to take care of ourselves, we lost the motivation, or we've gained an excuse, right, to lean on that, allows us to not show up when we need to, not be disciplined when we need to. And when we don't feel good, we just say, maybe I'll feel better tomorrow, right? And I think that though there's benefits in regards to taking care of yourself, the unintended consequence is just things aren't getting done and that need to get done to live our best life. And so Elizabeth, I think, has that healthy balance and can help you distinguish between what actually needs to get done here to get the outcomes that we want and to stay consistent. And so I hope everybody enjoyed this episode. Elizabeth, thank you for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
No problem. And we'll see everybody on the next episode of the Holistic Hustle podcast.